It is now time to welcome on stage poets beyond the border, international poets, if you will, and who will speak about not just India as a theme, I'm guessing that would be one thread, but also about the complicating worlds. Now that is one theme which is a stated agenda of this session, but it'd be such a pleasure to welcome onto the stage with a round of applause. May we invite Fiona, Bolger, Malachi, Edwin, Vethamani, Davies, and Sudeep Sen to moderate it all. And of course the session which will be followed by Gulzar Sahab.
It's one of those sessions where we call in radio or television the graveyard shift, because it's the lunch session and nobody has been given time to eat. It's also the siesta session, but this session I'm pretty sure is going to be far from that. We have a fantastic panel of poets, one from Malaysia, Wales and Ireland. And one of the connecting, those slim thread, I would say, is that they're all connected to India in some way or the other. You'll see that when they read their poems. Because it's a poetry festival, I really think it's important not to talk too much and let the poetry speak for themselves, because we are really here to hear these fine poets and how they read and their work. I've had the privilege of reading Edwin's work for many, many years now. Fiona and Nia's work I've read in PDFs, their last books. And all their books are out there for sale, so they'll be happily signing them for you. The format is simple. They'll be each reading for 8 minutes, their poetry. 8 minutes is theirs to do whatever they wish to do. Then we'll have a dialogue, both amongst ourselves as well as with you, after which we'll have a Q&A. So we'll keep it as uncluttered as possible. So we start with the person who's from the most western part, I suspect. So Wales would go first. So Nia, would you like to begin?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm going to start with a poem that won't make any sense in India, actually. It's about cricket and about the lack of interest in cricket in in Britain. I live next to a cricket ground and it's very kind of run down and quiet. No one really goes to any cricket there. And I was thinking this is a bit like poetry. So what I thought was a good place to read something that was actually, won't really make any sense here. I also don't really know anything about cricket until I had to write this poem for a completely cricket-obsessed friend of mine. It's called Let's Make Experience. Yep, there we go. They used to say womanish, and that would mean your throw. At St. Helens, there are 2 banks, 1 enclosure and a grandstand. You'd think that would be clear. Let's stroke the surface of cricket, but not get in too deep. Bars are colour-coded, but I don't think drinks are available. St. Helens, the venue, is experienced as a separate franchise and is not to be confused with St. Helens, the grounds. It's cricket season and the students are on Prozac. I know nothing of krill, but I can try to experience it. The leaf encrustation at Gate A is an experience, and you can easily trespass onto the grandstand. Ticket sales cannot happen here. If only cricket could attract a larger audience. They used to say cricket widow, and that would mean bitch. There's a lot of handsome shadows, and I feel alienated. I like womanish things like manicures. I'd often be disappointed at the heavy balls. Cricket isn't winning around here. It is making nothing happen. Sunday, 24th of May, at the Cricketers Inn, opposite St. Helens, you can catch an adult party hosted by Mad J, guaranteed an experience. Yes. Let's make this experience cricket. Yes. Thank you. So this next poem is just called Poem with Sex. And it comes with a little tag, sex is not a project, which is something Susan Sontag said. Sex as the universal human baseline. Sex as solid, rockable. Sex as the species in-joke. Sex as the one becama, the mashing thing. The underside of sex topples, and I share a space with this thought. Sex as the great destroyer and creator, as the opposite of death drive. The ex libris of sex as a palm with a word or a letter on it. I search piano and open on Pinterest. Everything, sex is happening even when you think it isn't. I like Tamara's piano, and that's not a metaphor. Desire as inextinguishable smoulder and chief cliché. The notion of so much sex as taunting versus not living because of sex. The door opens automatically. The word romantic has returned. What does sex without love have in common with love without sex? For the past 10 minutes, I have not been thinking about sex, except to write this. The weather of sex is not only notional, the humidity and restraint, the flicker and boom, the rules of its own and its knife edge. It's for you to enjoy, but it's not like buttered biscuits or stacked books, a closet full of good quality garments. Sex as the open sesame, sexual fantasy as trolling of the self and auto-relief. Eros, plasticity of the self, and card games on trains with vodka and sweat, and this was not a planned sex, this was cod love. Dunno, it's like a stick of rock on the beach, and that has nothing to do with our sex life. Sex is rocking the ocean liner and leaving itself at high tide everywhere. It's not common to give one's parents a commentary on one's sex life. In the anechoic chamber of the word perfect love, sandwiches and crisps. Love is not really a buttonhole or a mouse, but I'm sure comparisons have been made. I should have cried more in the attic room. It was so bright with moths and rugs, but this was not a good place to lie down in. And I could have chosen better linen, but we didn't have a maid, and what is the source anyhow? The source is dying. Okay, just read one more poem. These poems are from this book called All Fours. This has just come out from Blood Axe. This is called The Magical Experience, and it's also about something I know nothing about, a bit like cricket. It's something I've never done. The magical experience. It ricocheted because it was coming. And that's when I realised the pain, up from my gums to my hamstrings. Oh, abandon me. I was working a way out round, yes, my story about those terrible times. The body is readily halved. Pain is a badge, a window. Summaries of God or godlessness don't tend to open oyster shells, and I was no shell, not relatively safe, not accustomed to being dependent on servants or being unable to service my trollop needs. Cancel my subscription to Elle decoration. I mean to say there was much to tell you about. Let me rephrase that. I was on all fours. Bless my husband, he did not see it coming. I refused to go to Coventry. They sent me anyway. I flew a Cossack out of my metaphorical window. I lay drugless, magical. Thank you.
Edwin, just to sort of balance the gender, even though we're not sticking to the longitudes and the latitudes.
Since Nia started with something to do with sex, I thought I'll keep that going for a bit. This poem is entitled, When You Settle for Sex. When you settle for sex, love takes flight. When you settle for sex, you get passionless, raw energies. When you settle for sex, you get colliding bodies, no intimacy. When you settle for sex, you get a flower, no fragrance. When you settle for sex, you get climaxes, no fulfillment. When you settle for sex, sex is what you get. And if that's what you want, who is to say it's a bad thing? The second poem, very much contemporary situation, at least in my part of the world. I will text you. I have put away my phone, but speech won't come. Words remain in the tip of my thumb. My lips are wordless. This attempt to utter, to give voice to my thoughts, has failed. I pick up my phone, words rush back. I press the keyboard, saying all that I tried and failed with my lips. Let me text you words of love. My tongue has hardened from disuse. This poem from sun and rain. Daytime sweat, saving dollars to return home one day, to buy land, build a house, raise a family. The journey home, constantly deferred, soon blurs familiar family faces. News from home arrives with newcomers, few and far between, scant and sketchy. Life takes a new turn and begins to take root in the once harsh, friendless, orphaned land. The years pass on, the world encroaches upon little lives with deaths and disappearances. A sudden change of masters, abandoned by the white man, terrorized by Japanese swords, heads on stakes. Survived to hear shouts of Merdeka, gave little cause for rejoicing, received a red identity card, labeling him foreigner. His labor, faith in his God, hope for his children remain resolute and unyielding. The change of masters has meant little for his lot. Still second-class citizens meted out mere meager morsels. The land that had drawn the father now pushes the children away to seek new shores. They now depart to distant lands, leaving father and mother like their father once had. Ternalweli, Madras, Penang, Kuala Lumpur, Malaya, Malaysia. All the places my father passed through, then resolutely remained, refusing to return. Now he lies in Choras, his final rest, all labors done, in Malaysian soil with a Malaysian identity card. Thank you. The next poem that I'm going to read is taken from my first collection called Complicated Lives, and it's entitled It's Complicated. Again, very much an urban phenomena, I would say. Our lives are a mess, so we fashionably say it's complicated. We still hold hands in the car. You gently remove yours, steer the car, and return it as before, but it is not as before. The years have been good to us, yet when I have your hand in mine, I wonder if it is mine you feel or another's. I know every line in your slightly coarse palm, the calluses and soft ridges. What do you feel, my love? I remember when we were not complicated in love and loved. Now we love, but are not quite in love. We have not moved on and have chosen to stay. Untangling is not a choice. Complicated is difficult, but we will manage complicated and love the way only we can. Do I have time? Okay. I'm going to read a poem entitled Only Brickfields. My father, as you would have gathered from the first poem, arrived from Tirunelveli and stayed on in Malaya. And so we were born in Malaysia. And this notion of home has always been a problem for us because with urbanization, the place that we lived changed quite a bit and eventually has been erased from the face of the area where we once stayed. Those of you who have been to Kuala Lumpur would probably recognize the word central because that's where the main train station is and bus station if you're coming in from the airport. So that place was originally called Brickfields. Still Brickfields. On Brickfields' old pavements now stand concrete colorful arches trying to give a semblance of an Indian enclave it once was. Buildings rise and spring at me. These monsters have devoured my playgrounds and past. My childhood church no longer stands alone, now surrounded by brothels and massage parlors. Yet, I still see my city's house, its huge garden of banana trees, playing with my cousins amidst the chickens and ducks. I still hear the sounds of the ice cream man's bicycle bell. The roti man's blaring horn will follow. The Scott Road Hindu temple still stands, but stripped of its peacock pen and rain trees. The river bank is concrete, the lalang and weeds gone. The river wears a monsoon rain mask. There, I once caught fish and saw floating corpses during the May riots that undid us. One by one, we were torn away. Then the big flood came and sealed our fate. Now we return like tourists with our children. They wander on these small spaces we once called home. This is my Brickfields, never central. Thank you.
Bolger from Ireland.
I'm from Allahabad. Just to confuse the issue. So, okay. I'm a thief. The language I speak is not my country's native language. And so I've borrowed that language to express myself, and I've borrowed other languages too. And I'll start with a poem called A Compound of Words. Try to atomize what you're looking at. Imagine each letter a string supplying a side way to transubstantiation, avoiding the black hole of a lemon market, the consonants shifting, the click of the Q Celtic fossils trickle down through the generations. Do you know it's all Maya, and we Salah must do penance. Aripavangani! As you cruise for a bruise, crushed together, we make juice. Blunt knives. 1. Words are my gold, and you handed me so many they weighed me down. I fingered my newfound wealth until you packed up, went away, packed up your illusion, went away, leaving nothing behind. The coins turned copper, medicinal metal, a cure for vanity and believing beautiful untruths. 2, master of the visual, you bend words. Like light, they enter my brain upside down. I've no way to write them. I misread them, I miss green mango pattern saris, the rejoicing soil of Agni Nakshetram, the star which burns everything to red, iron rich, while the poor are anemic, the rich have no backbone. 3, and the frogs emerge, rejoicing in the dampness. They are everywhere but where your feet land. They live avoiding falling feet. 4. My feet fall mainly in my mouth as I attempt to drill through stone with my teeth. 5. The carpet is pure wool, duck egg blue, the waiting room, a dentist surgery where I went to confess my teeth. Rushed mornings, late nights, gums and rushed mornings, unloved gums and missing fillings. There are gaps filled with emptiness. It leaks out, pools and crevices and fissures. 6, your skin touching mine draws tear marks on my cheeks. I clench my eyes, making a fist of the moment. 7, butter straight from the fridge is too hard to spread. It makes crackers break and puts holes in sliced pan. In boarding school, we mashed butter on the side of the bowl to soften it. This was how young ladies behaved at afternoon tea. Our box pleats carried butter and jam stains from knives wiped on formica table edges. The knives were blunt, but there were other sharp edges. You learned to turn your back to protect major arteries. 8, skin taught to sing, kanjira, mridangam, ta hatta jummateri tak, skin of soul to temple stone, te de de te, te te de de te, skin pours itself into the rhythm, te 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 de de te, jasmine-scented sweat. 9, the wind is an instrument sailors play well, inflates the fantasy, carries carpets over waves. Magical thinking, a science not yet explained. 10, somewhere, someone is traveling furiously toward you. 13, 12. Smaller than a bee in the rain cloud forest, bright frogs are found, their colors shout, touch me not. Women's black burqas shed as they fled the darkness of yes, reveal shifting silken shades, glow, ahmar, burtakali, asfar, aktar, azrak, nili, argwani. 13. With every word she spoke, golden coins fell from her lips because she had been gentle and kind to the baby crocodile. Her cruel sisters, every breath released a shower of frogs from her mouth in payment for her harsh treatment of the little one. 14. Today I gave my green away, frittered the gold on idle objects, and now I feel more see-through. Waves of light flow between my ribs, and my stomach churns with the breeze of movement. I want to reach a point of stillness, each shade and time fixed. The sun no longer changing everything moment to moment. The moon unable to work a glistening magic on the dull of days. I wish to be a stillness which has seeped into the air and is almost, just almost, not there. This is one of the first poems I wrote when I started writing properly, seriously. And I lived in India for many years, and I wrote, but I never realized I was writing. And I went back to Ireland, and I started writing, and I haven't stopped. And this is one of those first poems. And it's called Words to a New Wife Entering Her Kitchen. And I'd like to dedicate it to anyone who has ever found themselves in a situation that relates to this. So, hey, listen. I'm thinking of a particular person whom I love very much. Pack away your feelings neatly in spice jars. Carefully label each one clearly in black. Anger, first you pack with chilies, red and hot. Manjal will fight off sickness, even lust. Cloves, levang, take away pain, let go your hurt. Cinnamon, sweet spice of joy, leave friend love here. Jira next, reduces pain of childbirth. Put away child love. With saffron, your baby can come fair or not at all. Store control. Asafoetida, stinking spice will hide your shame. Black pepper, currency once conceals your greed. Saump's sweet taste helps digest disappointment. Happiness can be kept here. With menthia, fear of age, fear of life, bitterness will go unnoticed. Whatever heats your blood, ginger won't reveal it. Memories. Memories pack away with gussa gussa, forget. And when you finish scattering yourself around your kitchen, do not be surprised if you think like a cabbage. Dream of beetroot, aspire to be a grain. You are now vegetable matter, no longer fruit. Only raw mangoes come in the kitchen. The ripe and juicy mambaram are eaten at first sight.
Thank you, Fiona.
One more? No. Okay. Thank you.
I have to be a strict timekeeper. We started at 2:15. We have another 15 minutes for question and answers, and so the audience gets involved. But one of the things I want to ask you all, and anybody can take this up, is the fact that quite unusually, even though you're Western poets, so to speak, well, you're from Malaysia and India and so on, but the tongues you come from is not just English. There's Welsh, there's Gaelic, there's South Indian languages and so on. So tell us how much of that sort of other echo, the other language, informs your English writing, so to speak.
Thank you. In Malaysia, well, the national language is the Malay language, and the major ethnicities are Chinese, then followed by Indians. Now we have so many immigrants, so I think there are more Indonesians and Bangladeshis in Malaysia than there are Indians, actually. So I write in English because that's my predominant language, it's my primary language. well, I spoke Tamil as a child, but never really had formal education because Tamil in Malaysia has very little currency, and my father was very strategic. So we learned English and we learned Malay because we felt that that's where we were going to stay for most of our life, if not for the rest of our lives. But because my education I had was through an English education, and therefore being exposed to English writing and American writing, and I mean, so English very much influences my language and my writing. But when I do write poems, and especially if I'm writing about home and family, I notice that a lot of Tamil words come into my poem, my writing. And the poem that I read, A Habitation of His Own, there's one word which I used, merdeka, which meant independence. It's quite ironic because we just, moved from one colonial master to another, and we have our own forms of hegemony these days. So yes, English is very much what I'm accustomed to and I use in my writing. And it also gives me accessibility to more readers in the country because, it's not a political choice, but it's a creative choice. Thank you.
I grew up in earshot of the Welsh language, which is the language of Wales alongside English. And I think that had listening to that language and listening to its different shapes as a child really trained my ear and really did something for me as a writer. I think nowadays my writing is taking sort of strange bits of English from all over the place, not just from Wales, but I'm still very interested in this strange English that is spoken, that has kind of borrowed things from Welsh, that's certainly.
I find it really strange to be called a Western poet. I don't consider myself a Western poet or an Eastern poet. I'm a poet from between places, with a foot in each place. So I grew up learning Irish, and I speak passable Irish. There's nobody here who can prove me wrong. And I can get by in a few languages. And I just love language, and I love the sound of language, and I love the power of it. So when I write, it's the word that comes into my head. I know the word turmeric is there, but manjal, it's just, I want to eat manjal. I want to rub manjal on my body. Turmeric, yeah. So that's for me how it is. It's how I feel.
So she's clearly got it all over her body, clearly. One of the things that struck me, and it happens often, it's obviously not planned, or at least not pre-planned in the way that it comes across, that people were reading a lot about sex. I'll be interested in knowing, because the poems actually gave a very good insight as to how to tackle sex. It's a very difficult subject to write about convincingly without people falling over the chair. Serious writing on sex is quite difficult. So because one of the things that's actually happening, certainly in India, I know, because I follow Indian writing very, very closely, is writing, remapping the body. Especially women are writing fabulously well about the politics of body. I'll be keen to know from your points of view how that sort of relates to male writing in your country, and in your case, women's writing. It's a broad question, but you can take any.
Shall I start? Some things in life are better experienced. And so I think sex is one of those. But I also think that a poem is not about describing an experience to somebody, to an audience. A poem is about putting something out there that gives the audience an experience. There's no point in my having the most amazing Tamil, sambar recipe and telling you about it if you can't taste it. So I think it's the same thing with poetry. What you have to do is put something on the page that makes the reader or the listener feel something that they have felt in their lives. So both of our poets did that today, I think, in their sex poems.
I like the fact that we both were talking about the complications of sex. In terms of men writing, in Britain, men have stopped writing about desire.
No, I'm glad you said that because that was one of the reasons I asked you that. But go on.
And the reasons for that, I probably shouldn't venture because they're probably very complicated. But I still really, I don't mind men writing about desire. I think sometimes they've become a bit apprehensive in case of making a mistake. But I think they should keep going as long as they thoroughly acquaint themselves with feminism.
In Malaysia, talking about sex, or especially if you're a woman and if you want to write about sex, is quite honestly to invite trouble, because we are very much an Islamic nation, and therefore there's a lot of self-censorship that goes on in our writings. Whether you are, a woman, or if you are gay or a lesbian and you want to express your sexuality, that becomes a very major problem. And I think in some ways, poetry does allow us to write on these issues, and very often because of ambiguity and metaphorical language, you can allude and let the reader decide what is it that they take away from the writing. But there are one or two women writers who do express themselves, but still with very much caution. And I think that's one of the things that probably hold back any kind of marginalized communities. And I still think in Malaysia, women are very much marginalized. Yeah.
We have about 7 or 8 minutes for questions from the audience, if anybody has any queries or comments. If you just put your...
Sir.
Okay, if you just introduce yourself.
I'm Ramesh Dutt, and I would like to ask a question on sex, as you have mentioned right now. Some of the poems and the topics that I heard right now, they were more on sexlessness. So is this a revival of the era that was the beginning of the 20th century when T.S. Eliot wrote Wasteland? Are we heading towards the same themes, same topics, and the same wasteland? Thank you.
Who wants to take that?
I don't think it's the same wasteland, but we still experience the kind of human experiences where some places do seem sterile and some relationships seem to have, I mean there are a lot of problematic relationships, and the digital age does not help very much because we become so much driven by our devices, we don't quite need another human person. So I think those are some of the things that I am concerned about. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're talking about the whole idea of wasteland, the wasteland, I don't think it's entered the sexual domain, certainly not in the parts we live in. Because I think people are much more sexually active, much more daring. Especially, I think the women in India, they're making fantastic, I know poets who write very finely about sex. Recently, I saw a film called Lipstick Under the Burqa. I mean, that's a metaphor for how you deal with repression, except that here the women characters are much, much stronger than the male characters. So there is a time and place for everything. In our country, of course, we started with the Kama Sutra, but look at how regressive we've become. But the interesting thing about tackling sex is the way they tackle a word which we are losing from our vocabulary, which is called intimacy. Desire and intimacy are such important things in our life that we forget that that's an essential connect, not just between people, but between music and words, between touch, between other arts and so on.
And the romanticism, of course.
Without that, kavita ki fayda hi kya hai? Anybody else? Very short poem by each of you, which means 1 minute each.
This is a poem for Eurydice and Orpheus. And blow in the gods' good wake to leave only pounded dust. And that's a poem from a line. That's a line from a poem called The Death of Orpheus. When he pressed my cheek, the vibration he made, seriously, how did I not laugh right back in his ear? But instead, the ill scent that felt well won or worn, I'd take his army of birds, his spell-breaking death already in him. Pity the mortal killed by women. Pity the shreds of him he became. I'd take it, feathers in shreds, foretaste tasted like metals, some sibilance in his last number of the night. This is a poem about drowning or a botched rescue, where the rescuer sings of himself.
I'll read to you the first poem in a series of poems that are called Amidst the Silences. This poem is called Silences We Live By. It's another Monday morning. You've returned as you always do. You tell me your stories, those you want me to hear. But between the stories, I hear the silences, the stories you don't share. Those silences are yours and his stories. Does he hear our silences? Thank you.
This is a completely stolen poem, and I thought it was a ghazal, but now I realize that I've actually missed a whole load of the complexity of the ghazal, so it's ghazal-like. And it's for a woman called Parveena and her son Javed, who disappeared in 1991. And the words are all completely stolen from Kashmiri. Where have you hidden my new crescent moon? I search for my son by the light of the moon. A hawk swooped down and took him away. Is he high in the mountains near to the moon? When he disappeared, my fear went away. I approach armed men under sun and moon. I've searched camps, hospitals, and jails. Where is he? Can my child see the moon? I watched over my son as he grew under the waxing and waning of the moon. The bodies they found prove our worst fears. The tears of the living light up the moon. I cannot forget his bright sunny face. Grey corpses glitter beneath the full moon.
Give them a rousing applause. I'm amazed to see for poetry there are no seats available for people to, there's standing room only. Once again, thank you, the three of you. You were fabulous. And their books are here for sale. They'll be happy to sign them. You can tweet photographs, do Instagram. Please spread the word. And thank you, Bangalore Literature Poetry Festival.
Mind-blowing.
Defies words. And right now I'm bathed in manjal.
When you feel physically as if your head is blown away, that is truly poetry. And I think we felt that in today's session. And more importantly, we started today, the day about poems, languages across India. And here we are in the middle of the afternoon, having traveled across the globe and heard different languages in English And I think each one of us understood exactly what was being communicated. It brings me to a quote by our very own Rabindranath Tagore. Everything comes to us that belongs to us if we create the capacity to receive it. And I think today we've enjoyed everything that we've received because we all have the capacity to receive each word that we've got today.